Right, if I can come to Tom now. Tom, how has the bus safety programme and bus safety standard been received, and what else should be included within them, I think?
Like I said, I think from one perspective, transparency. TfL probably is the most transparent bus safety, at least in terms of data publishing, probably in the world. And that is 100% due to the London Assembly and myself getting on their case and making them do the work. So it's good. There's a lot more that needs to be done. And I would argue on transparency, I think obviously the safety performance index being published would be very important. I also think the route risk assessments or audits would be great to be published as well. I think people should know what TfL deems to be risks on routes, and I think that should be published on the route data information. I think the issue I have with TfL is that there's a lot of information that's out there that it's not getting, and I think Sinisa pointed to the bus drivers are one of the key constituents here in terms of they suffer. They have pretty substantial issues with collision injuries. I mean, I have some data that showed 370 collisions last year injuring bus drivers, of which 38 were hospitalized with serious injuries. So this affects bus drivers too. And I think bus drivers are a huge source of information, huge source of knowledge, and huge source of experience that is not being consulted on a level, I think, at a level and detail enough. I mean, there are 20 bus routes in London that don't have 24/7 toilets for bus drivers. Now, in terms of safety, if you're getting behind the wheel of a bus that doesn't have a guaranteed toilet, that already says it.
Yeah, we're coming on to that.
That's fine, but I'm just thinking, we talk about technology, we talk about all the great things, and I think some of the basic things, as has been pointed out, need to be focused on.
So can I ask you then, Tom, what do you feel are the top 3 things that would improve bus safety?
I think transparency. I think you need to have, for example, we know every quarter, or at least every quarter, there's the bus safety, there's a bus operators forum, and I think that should be participated in, at least on an observation basis. If you're talking about safety at any point, that a member of the London Assembly or a private individual, whatever independent person should attend this. I think it's very important that safety is scrutinized on a regular basis. Secondly, accountability. I think this is something that Caroline and you have been pushing on, is TfL does not have a bus operator's license. That is owned by the 10 bus operators. So in some respects, TfL has no responsibility for the behavior of any private for-profit bus that's operated on London Road. I want, the mayor has already identified the MDs of those companies as being ultimately accountable for safety. I want those MDs contact details or the chief safety officer of each company listed on the TfL website. So when you're in a bicycle or in a car or anything, when you have an incident, you contact a person at that company, not at TfL. If Mike Brown says they're not getting the data or they'll be cut out of the loop, then find some way to cut TfL in the loop.
What's the reason for contacting them directly, though?
Let me give you a good example. A friend of mine nearly killed by a go-ahead bus, and he sent in a claim or whatever, the TfL website where you put in the data, and he also then, I gave him the contact details, and Claire Mann was copied of this conversation as well. And he got an immediate response from the bus company when he sent it to the directo. I don't think he's gotten any response from TfL yet, from the website. Bus CCTV data. Sean Barry, your colleague, asked. It disappears between 4 and 10 days. It's owned by the bus companies as well. If there's a 4-day, I mean, I experienced it myself. There was no CCTV evidence from any bus of my bus collision where I nearly died because it was over Christmas time and no one bothered to ask. So I managed to get it later when I bugged the companies and things like that, but that was after I filed an IPCC claim and stuff. But anyway, the bottom line is an individual who is seriously injured should not have to chase down people through FOIs and everything to try to get information about their near death. And that's the issue. The bus company MDs have to be held responsible and have to be contactable. If not them, then their chief safety officer. The last issue is corporate governance. I really think that a stakeholder of some sort needs to be on every single bus operator board for London. They can be observational. They don't have to be at all the meetings, or they don't have to be at all the incidents we're talking about market-related stuff. But I think they need to sit on any meeting where safety is discussed. And I think boards would be strengthened and companies would be strengthened by having individuals who were not related to the bus company or TfL sat on these company boards. And I really think that would be a cure.
They would be like ex officio, though. They wouldn't necessarily have voting rights.
You would apply for these jobs. I mean, you couldn't just be off the street. You would have real credentials.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people in London be willing to serve in those roles.
Okay, so in our report, we've got a graph that shows that bus collisions and customer injuries are going down per million miles. Have you any views on that sort of thing?
I do. I've saw that recently. Since September 2018, TfL has been using million miles, so they use a very large denominator. Now, prior to that point, for 4 years, or at least 2 years, TfL published completely different stats that show bus injuries increasing and collisions from bus injuries increasing. When you divide something by a million miles, it automatically, and especially over time, you're going to reduce things. Boeing 737 MAX plane got safer after it crashed in Indonesia on the basis of that logic. The more a thing travels, you can divide it, and the incidents go down. And I think this is a tricky and not very honest way of dividing it by a million miles. Is not an even or fair way to do it. Do it the way that was done up until June of 2018. Show the actual numbers. That's the important thing. Not the
what did actual numbers show?
Increase every year since 2014. Collisions of falls on buses was slightly higher. London buses, customer injuries total were higher, and London bus collisions going up. But when you divide it by a million miles, it's like magic, it just goes down.
We're not getting very near to vision zero, are we?
Well, you do, but you do it by changing the denominator.
All right.